James Holt was harvesting hybrid tomatoes when the galaxy's most dangerous woman arrived at his door. He didn't know she was coming. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't filed an approach vector with colonial traffic control, hadn't done any of the things people usually did before visiting a remote farming settlement on Halcyon's edge. She just showed up at sunset, knocked on his door with the kind of authoritative rhythm that suggested ignoring it would be both futile and possibly unwise. James set down his harvest basket, wiped soil from his hands, and opened the door expecting maybe a delivery or possibly another attempt by his neighbor Mrs. Chen to convince him to attend the community council meetings. Instead, he found himself looking at approximately 6 feet of armored warrior whose reputation preceded her by several star systems. Commander Zara Kethmer of the Valkorian Empire stood on his porch in full battle armor that looked like it had seen actual combat, rather than ceremonial display. She carried weapons that were probably illegal in 12 jurisdictions and definitely concerning on a peaceful farming colony. Her face was uncovered, sharp features that were humanoid but distinctly alien, eyes that held an inner luminescence, facial markings that indicated Valkorian military rank high enough that James's limited knowledge couldn't fully parse it. "I think you have the wrong address," James managed, his brain struggling to process why the most feared warrior in known space was standing on his porch between his tomato plants and the decorative solar lights Mrs. Chen had insisted he install. "You are James Holt," Zara said. Her voice was precise, accented, carrying weight that made it less question than confirmation. "Xenobotanist, formerly of the Meridian Research Consortium, currently residing on Halcyon's Edge under independent agricultural license. I have the correct address." "Okay, but I'm just a farmer now. I don't do xenobotany anymore. If this is about research, I'm not the person you want." "This is not about research." Zara's luminescent eyes fixed on him with intensity that suggested she was conducting threat assessment and finding him spectacularly unthreatening. 17 years ago, on the contested world of Tertius Minor, you saved my life. By Valkorian law, that debt must be repaid in person. I have come to fulfill my obligation, and if you accept, to name you as consort guardian under my people's oldest traditions. James's brain, which had been prepared for maybe a package delivery, or at worst a surprise inspection from agricultural authorities, completely shut down. Behind Zara, he could see neighbors starting to gather at a safe distance, their expressions cycling between terror and morbid curiosity. "I've never been to— wait, yes I have. But that was 17 years ago for xenobotany research. I never saved anyone's life. Definitely not yours, because I'm pretty sure I'd remember meeting the commander of the Valkorian Empire." "You wouldn't remember. I was in primal form, wounded, separated from my unit during a campaign against separatist forces. You found me, treated my injuries, protected me until Valkorian forces arrived. You believed I was a local predator species. You saved me anyway." This was too surreal to be a hallucination, which meant it was somehow actually happening. James glanced at his neighbors, who were now filming this on their handhelds because of course they were. "Maybe we should continue this conversation inside," he suggested, "before the entire colony decides to evacuate because they think you're planning an invasion." Zara glanced at the gathering crowd with what might have been amusement. "Acceptable." She entered his modest home with the kind of tactical awareness that suggested she was mapping exits and potential threat vectors. James closed the door against prying eyes and wondered if his life insurance was current. "I have images from the incident," Zara said, producing a data tablet. "Perhaps they will assist your memory." The images showed a younger James in xenobotany field gear, kneeling beside what looked like an injured animal with crystalline fur. He'd been taking samples of native flora when he'd found it, apparently. The creature was badly wounded, and according to the metadata, James had spent 6 hours synthesizing an antidote from local plants before Valkorian forces arrived and retrieved it. "I remember this," James said slowly. "There was a predator caught in some kind of trap, It was dying from poisoned wounds. I thought it was a local species. I reported finding it to authorities and assumed they'd send someone to relocate it after I stabilized it. That predator was me, Zara said. Valkorians can shift to primal form under extreme stress. It's a survival mechanism, but it renders us vulnerable and unable to communicate clearly. I was separated from my unit, injured by separatist weapons that used neurotoxins designed to counter our biology. I was dying when you found me. James looked at the images more carefully. The creature's eyes. He'd noted in his field observations that they seemed unusually intelligent. The way it had responded to treatment, as if understanding his explanations. Details he'd dismissed at the time because he'd been focused on the immediate crisis of keeping it alive. You used your xenobotany knowledge to synthesize an antidote from plants you'd never studied before, Zara continued. You saved my life without knowing what I was, without expectation of reward, at personal risk, because those separatist forces were still in the area. Under Valkorian law, a life debt of that magnitude must be repaid. So you've spent 17 years finding me to say thank you. That seems excessive. I've spent 17 years rising through military ranks, so I could repay you from a position of strength, an honor befitting the debt. The life debt can be fulfilled through material wealth, political favor, or personal bond. Given the magnitude, you saved a commander's life without knowing, without agenda. The appropriate repayment is the highest honor our culture can offer. The consort guardian thing, James said, remembering her initial declaration. If you accept, you gain protection under Valkorian law, standing in our society and authority to serve as my advisor and equal partner. The bond is recognized by both our peoples. Both our peoples, James asked, who knows you're here? I notified both governments as required by diplomatic protocol, your colonial administration, my military command. The announcement has been. She paused, searching for appropriate terminology, received with mixed reactions. That sounded ominous. His communicator chimed with approximately 17 urgent messages from colonial administration, 3 from neighbors, and 1 from someone identifying themselves as a Valkorian diplomatic envoy. All of them had variations on the same theme. What was he planning to do about the galaxy's most dangerous warrior announcing formal intentions on his porch? This is going to be complicated, isn't it? James asked. Significantly, Zara agreed. But I honor my debts regardless of complications. The choice is yours, James Holt. I will repay this life debt. How I repay it depends on what you choose to accept. James looked at this legendary warrior standing in his modest living room, surrounded by his agricultural equipment and the normal detritus of quiet farm life. He thought about 17 years ago when he'd helped what he believed was an injured animal because leaving it to die had felt wrong. He'd never expected consequences like this. Can you give me some time to think about it? He asked. This is significantly more complicated than my usual evening plans of dinner and crop rotation planning. Time is acceptable, Zara said, but you should know, not everyone wants this debt repaid. There are factions in both our governments who see my presence here as threat to political stability. They will attempt to convince you to refuse, or failing that, to eliminate the situation through less diplomatic means. You're saying people might try to kill me to prevent you from fulfilling a life debt. I'm saying I will prevent them from succeeding. But yes, that is a likely scenario. James sat down because his legs had apparently decided standing was too ambitious. My life was much simpler before you arrived. Simplicity is overrated, Zara said. Safety, however, is negotiable. I will establish security perimeter around your property. She left to do exactly that, and James sat in his quiet farmhouse contemplating how helping an injured animal, 17 years ago, had somehow resulted in the galaxy's most feared warrior, setting up defensive positions in his tomato fields. His communicator chimed again. Another message from colonial administration, this one demanding he report immediately to discuss the situation. The situation being that his simple farming life had just become exponentially more complicated, and he had a feeling it was going to get worse before it got better. The colonial administration's urgent meeting was held at 6 a.m. the next morning in their main office, which suggested they'd been awake all night panicking. James arrived to find Administrator Chen, Mrs. Chen's husband, which explained some things. Security Chief Morrison and 3 people via holographic conference who introduced themselves as representatives from Earth Central Diplomatic Corps. Mr. Holt, Administrator Chen began with the kind of forced calm that preceded complete breakdown. Do you understand the implications of what happened yesterday? A Valkorian warrior showed up at my house to repay a life debt I didn't know existed. James offered. The Valkorian Empire's most decorated military commander announced formal bonding intentions with a human colonist on a remote farming settlement. One of the Earth representatives corrected. This creates unprecedented diplomatic complications. I didn't ask her to come, James pointed out. She showed up because of something that happened 17 years ago that I'd completely forgotten about. Nevertheless, you're now at the center of interstellar attention, Security Chief Morrison said. Both governments are demanding we resolve this situation immediately. Resolve how? You refuse the bond, Administrator Chen said. Politely but firmly. Commander Zara fulfills her debt through material compensation or political favor instead. She returns to Valkorian space. Everything goes back to normal. And if I don't refuse? The Earth representatives exchanged glances. Then you become bonded to a Valkorian commander under their law, which grants you standing in their society and creates a relationship both governments have to acknowledge. It would be unprecedented, potentially destabilizing. The Valkorian Empire has been humanity's primary military rival for 20 years. Having their most capable warrior personally bonded to a human creates complications neither government is prepared for. So you want me to refuse to protect political convenience, James said. We want you to refuse to protect yourself, Morrison corrected. Not everyone is happy about this life debt. There are factions who see it as weakness, as betrayal, as threat to established power structures. Some of those factions have resources and willingness to use them. Commander Zara mentioned that might be an issue. She's correct. We've already intercepted 3 communications suggesting that eliminating you would be the simplest solution to this diplomatic problem. Morrison pulled up threat assessment data. You're not safe, Mr. Holt. Refusing the bond is your best chance at returning to normal life. James thought about Zara's assessment of his crop rotation patterns, her tactical analysis of Mrs. Chen's structurally unsound barn, the way she'd spent last evening establishing security perimeter around his property, with the kind of thoroughness that suggested she took protection very seriously. What if I don't want to refuse? He asked. Administrator Chen looked like he'd bitten something unpleasant. Then we can't protect you. The best we can do is provide standard colonial security, which isn't designed to handle interstellar assassination attempts. You'd be putting yourself and this entire colony at risk. Commander Zara seems capable of providing security. She's one warrior against coordinated efforts by people with significant resources. Mr. Holt, I understand you don't have context for Valkorian politics, but refusing this bond is the rational choice. James stood. I'll think about it, but I'm not making decisions based on threats from people too cowardly to make them directly. He left the meeting to find Zara waiting outside, her armor somehow looking more intimidating in morning sunlight. They advised you to refuse, she said, not a question, very strongly, with threat assessments and diplomatic complications and suggestions that accepting would be irrational. They're not wrong about the complications or the threats, but complications and threats don't eliminate the debt. Only your choice determines how it's repaid. She paused. Walk with me. I want to show you something. They walked through the colony's main settlement. Modest buildings, agricultural processing facilities, the community center where Mrs. Chen's Harvest Festival had been held last month. Colonists watched them pass with expressions ranging from curious to terrified. "Your neighbors fear me," Zara observed. "You're a legendary warrior from an empire that's been in conflict with humanity for 2 decades. They're probably wondering if you're scouting invasion routes. Halcyon's Edge has no strategic value. It's too remote for supply lines, too small for military staging. Invading it would be pointless. I don't think fear is always rational. Fear is often the most rational response to uncertainty." She stopped at the colony's edge where farmland met wilderness. "I've been gathering intelligence since I arrived. There are 6 individuals currently on this colony who don't match settlement records. 3 arrived on unauthorized transports within the last 48 hours. They're conducting surveillance on your property." "Assassins?" James asked, though he'd already guessed. "Advanced scouts. The assassination attempts will begin once they've established patterns and weaknesses." She looked at him directly. "I can protect you, but only if you allow me to. If you refuse the bond and ask me to leave, I must honor that choice. And you will be vulnerable. So my choices are accept the bond and gain protection, or refuse and probably die. Your choices are accept the bond and acknowledge 17-year-old debt, while gaining partnership with someone committed to your safety, or refuse and hope whoever wants you dead lacks the competence to succeed." Zara's expression was difficult to read. "I won't force this choice through fear. The debt is mine to repay. Acceptance must be yours to give freely, but you should make that choice with accurate understanding of consequences." They walked back to James's farm in silence. The security perimeter Zara had established was subtle but comprehensive. Sensors disguised as agricultural equipment, defensive positions that looked like landscape features, monitoring systems integrated into existing infrastructure. "You really take this debt seriously," James said. "You saved my life when doing so served no purpose except compassion. That deserves recognition beyond political calculation. If you accept, I will defend you with everything my rank and resources provide. If you refuse, I will respect your choice and find other means to repay what I owe. But I won't lie about which choice offers better odds of your survival." That was refreshingly direct in a way James appreciated after the morning's political maneuvering. His communicator chimed, another message, this one from a Valkorian diplomatic channel. "Commander Zara Kethmer is ordered to return to Valkorian space immediately to address questions regarding her personal obligations. The life debt will be fulfilled through appropriate monetary compensation. Human consort guardian bonds are not approved by High Command." "Your government isn't happy either," James observed, showing Zara the message. "High Command rarely approves anything that wasn't their idea originally. They see my personal choices as reflecting on military authority." She read the message with what looked like annoyance. "They can order me to return. They cannot order me to abandon unfulfilled debt. Valkorian law is older than High Command. So you're defying orders by being here. I'm fulfilling obligations that supersede orders. There's a distinction, though High Command may not appreciate it." Over the following days, James's quiet farm became the center of increasing pressure from multiple directions. Human officials visited daily with new arguments for why he should refuse the bond. Valkorian diplomatic representatives demanded Zara return and stop, embarrassing the empire with inappropriate personal attachments. Meanwhile, the surveillance Zara had detected intensified. The 6 individuals became 8, then 10. They maintained careful distance, but their presence was constant. Through it all, Zara remained, establishing security, optimizing his agricultural operations with military efficiency, and occasionally making observations that revealed she'd been paying attention to details James hadn't articulated. "You left xenobotany because corporate interests corrupted your research," she said one evening while they reviewed crop rotation data. "Not a question. How did you know that?" "I investigated your history when I learned your identity. The Meridian Research Consortium wanted to weaponize your discoveries about adaptive flora. You refused. They attempted to proceed without you. You resigned and disappeared to a farming colony where your expertise would be wasted, but your ethics would remain intact. It was an uncomfortably accurate summary. You researched my entire background. I research everything thoroughly. It's effective. She paused. I respect the choice you made. Principles maintained at personal cost are rare, especially when abandoning them would have been profitable. It didn't feel like a choice at the time. It felt like the only option I could live with. That's what makes it meaningful, Zara said. Easy choices don't reveal character. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, reviewing agricultural data that Zara had somehow converted into tactical logistics optimization. She was right about his crop rotation. He was losing yield through inefficient patterns. She was also right about Mrs. Chen's barn, which had partially collapsed last week exactly as Zara had predicted. The first real assassination attempt came on the 6th day. James was checking irrigation systems when Zara appeared from nowhere, grabbed him, and pulled him behind cover half a second before a sniper round obliterated the sensor he'd been examining. "Stay down," she ordered, already returning fire with weapons that made sounds James had only heard in war footage. The attack was brief, professional, and ended with Zara neutralizing the sniper, while James remained pressed against an irrigation unit wondering if his life insurance would pay out for death by interstellar political complications. "Are you injured?" Zara asked, helping him stand after confirming the threat was neutralized. "Just terrified. Is this going to be a regular occurrence?" "Until we formalize the bond, or definitively refuse it, yes. The uncertainty creates opportunity for those who want this situation resolved through violence." James looked at the destroyed irrigation sensor, then at the direction the sniper round had come from. "They're willing to kill me to prevent you from fulfilling a debt. They're willing to kill you to prevent a bond that threatens their political interests." A Valkorian commander with personal ties to a human colonist suggests cooperation is possible. 20 years of profitable conflict would be undermined by that symbol. "So this is about politics, not personal. Everything involving me is political. My rank makes it inevitable." Zara surveyed the area with the kind of tactical awareness that had made her legendary. "But the debt is also personal. You saved me without knowing what I was, without expecting reward. That deserves recognition beyond political manipulation. The choice remains yours, but you should make it soon. The attacks will escalate." That night, Zara showed him the evidence she'd been compiling. Coordination between Valkorian nobles and human officials who wanted the life debt dissolved. Communication logs proving they'd been manufacturing incidents to increase pressure on both of them. "They're working together?" James asked, reviewing the data. "I thought our governments were rivals." "Rivals who profit from controlled tension. My bond with you threatens that profitable status quo. They've found common cause in preventing it." James studied the conspiracy spreading across his screen. Years of coordinated effort to maintain tension between species, because peace would cost certain parties billions in contracts and influence. "If I accept the bond," he said slowly, "I'm not just gaining protection. I'm choosing sides against people invested in keeping our species at odds." "Yes," Zara confirmed, "the life debt is personal, but accepting it has political implications neither of us can avoid. I won't force that choice, but you deserve to understand its full weight." James thought about the injured creature he'd helped 17 years ago, not knowing it was a Valkorian warrior, just knowing it needed help. He thought about the choice to leave xenobotany rather than compromise his ethics. He thought about 5 years of quiet farming while galaxy-scale conflicts continued, because people profited from them. "What does consort guardian actually entail?" he asked. "Under Valkorian law, equality. You become my partner with authority to advise, to challenge my decisions, to serve as guardian of principles when military necessity tempts compromise. You gain protection my rank provides, standing in Valkorian society, access to resources most humans never see. You also gain responsibility to be more than decoration, to actually provide the perspective and guidance the role demands. That's significant responsibility for a farmer. You were never just a farmer. You were a xenobotanist brilliant enough to synthesize antidotes from unknown flora in field conditions. You chose farming because your principles mattered more than career advancement. That's exactly the kind of person who should serve as guardian to someone with my capacity for violence. It was possibly the most Valkorian way of saying, "I trust you," that James had ever heard. The choice crystallized in that moment, not because of threats or political pressure, but because Zara had spent a week proving she valued his judgment enough to actually want his partnership rather than simply fulfilling obligation. "Okay," James said, "I accept the life debt and the consort guardian bond, and whatever political complications come with it." Zara's luminescent eyes shifted through colors James was learning to interpret. "You're certain? This choice carries significant consequences." "I've been certain about very few things in my life, but helping that creature 17 years ago was right. And accepting this bond feels like completing something that started then." The formal acceptance required specific protocols that Zara walked him through with military precision. James had to speak the words in Valkorian. She taught him the pronunciation, correcting his accent until he could deliver them with appropriate weight. The phrases roughly translated to acknowledgement of debt, acceptance of bond, and mutual oath of protection and partnership. They performed the ceremony in James's living room with no witnesses, except the recording devices both governments had undoubtedly planted. It felt simultaneously profound and absurd. Galaxy-altering commitment conducted between his agricultural equipment and the decorative solar lights misses. Chen had insisted made the place more welcoming. When James spoke the final phrases, Zara placed her hand over his heart, a mirror of the gesture she'd made on his porch days ago, and responded with her own oath. Her hand was warm through his shirt, and her eyes held colors his limited database couldn't fully interpret, but that felt like satisfaction mixed with relief. "It's done," she said. "You're now recognized as my consort guardian under Valkorian law. Both our governments must acknowledge it. And the protection you mentioned begins immediately. I'm transmitting our bond status to Valkorian Military Command with priority clearance. Any attack on you is now treated as attack on a commander's consort, an act of war rather than simple assassination." James's communicator exploded with notifications. Messages from colonial administration demanding explanation. Alerts from Earth Central Diplomatic Corps about unauthorized foreign entanglement. 3 separate communications from Valkorian diplomatic channels with varying levels of outrage. "I'm officially very unpopular with both our governments," James observed. "Join the club. I've been defying High Command's preferences since I arrived." Zara was already responding to military channels with the kind of authoritative precision that suggested she'd anticipated resistance. But they can't simply dismiss a formally recognized bond. It exists now under law both our peoples acknowledge. The conspiracy's response was swift and violent. That night, they launched a coordinated attack on the colony itself, framing it as Valkorian military aggression to justify retaliation and eliminate James in the resulting chaos. Zara detected the approach vectors before James even realized they were under attack. She moved with the fluid efficiency that had made her legendary, deploying defensive systems James hadn't known she'd installed, coordinating with what turned out to be Valkorian forces she'd called in as backup days ago. "You planned for this," James said, watching her tactical displays show incoming hostiles being intercepted. "I planned for everything. It's effective." She was coordinating 3 defensive positions while simultaneously analyzing attack patterns. "The assault is using stolen Valkorian weapons signatures to make it appear like our military is attacking. They want your government to retaliate and eliminate you as collateral damage. That's elaborate for an assassination attempt. That's standard procedure when personal bonds threaten established power structures." She highlighted specific attack vectors. "But they made a mistake. They assumed I'd be alone or at most with limited backup. They didn't account for the forces loyal to me rather than to the conspiracy. Through the defensive perimeter, James could see Valkorian ships engaging the attackers with overwhelming force. The assault that should have been devastating became a rout as Zara's tactical brilliance and superior firepower turned the tables completely. "You called in your own military?" James asked. "I called in warriors who value honor over political convenience. The ones who understand that a commander's life debt isn't political theater, it's sacred obligation." She neutralized another attack vector with casual efficiency. Also, I may have mentioned that proving my consort guardian's security was an excellent training exercise. Warriors appreciate practical applications. The battle ended within the hour. The attackers were captured, their weapons and communications providing comprehensive evidence of the conspiracy. Both governments would have to acknowledge what happened. Their officials had coordinated an attack on a civilian colony to prevent a personal bond that threatened their profitable status quo. In the aftermath, James's farm looked like a tactical operations center. Valkorian warriors were securing the perimeter, analyzing captured equipment, and generally treating a farming colony like recently captured territory. His neighbors were oscillating between terror and fascination. "Your people are very efficient," Mrs. Chen observed, watching Valkorian soldiers repair her barn with the same precision they'd used to neutralize attackers. "Also terrifying." "They're Zara's people," James corrected. "I'm still getting used to the idea that they're technically my people too now." Administrator Chen approached with the kind of exhausted resignation that came from watching your entire understanding of political reality collapse. "Mr. Holt, I need to update your colony status. You're now officially recognized as consort guardian to a Valkorian commander, which grants you, I'm honestly not sure what. Earth Central is still trying to figure out the legal implications." "Protection," Zara said, appearing beside James with the silent efficiency that was becoming familiar. "Political standing, access to Valkorian resources, authority to serve as diplomatic liaison between our peoples, and most importantly, permanent security detail that prevents further assassination attempts." "The security detail is staying?" Chen asked with visible alarm. "Until the conspiracy is fully dismantled and those responsible face justice, yes. My consort guardian's safety is not negotiable." Over the following weeks, the conspiracy unraveled. The captured attackers provided evidence that led to more arrests. Officials on both sides began cooperating to avoid worse charges. The full scope emerged: years of coordination to maintain profitable conflict, moderate voices silenced, attacks staged to prevent peace. The life debt that should have been a private matter between two individuals became the catalyst that exposed systematic corruption both governments had to acknowledge. James found himself in the surreal position of serving as bridge between species who were learning cooperation after decades of manufactured tension. His xenobotany background proved unexpectedly relevant. He could explain biological concepts to Valkorian scientists, translate cultural nuances for human diplomats, and identify areas where cooperation would benefit both species. Zara returned to military service, but she based herself on Halcyon's Edge rather than Valkorian command stations. Her presence transformed the remote farming colony into an unlikely diplomatic hub where human and Valkorian officials met on neutral ground. "Your crop yields have increased 17% since I optimized the rotation patterns," Zara observed one evening, reviewing agricultural data with the same intensity she applied to military logistics. "You really can't resist optimizing everything, can you?" James asked. "Optimization is a form of care. I optimize things I value." She paused. "Your neighbors are less terrified now." "Mrs. Chen invited me to the Harvest Festival Planning Committee." "Did you accept?" "I told her I'd provide security assessment and tactical support for crowd management." She seemed pleased. James laughed. "That's the most Valkorian way of saying yes to a Harvest Festival committee I've ever heard." Your influence is making me more accommodating to civilian social structures, Zara said. It sounded like an accusation, but her eyes held colors that suggested affection. That's what consort guardians do, provide perspective, challenge military thinking, remind you that not everything is a tactical operation. That some things benefit from tactical approaches. Mrs. Chen's festival logistics were inefficient. It's a community celebration, not a military campaign. Community celebrations should still be efficiently organized, Zara insisted. People enjoy themselves more when logistics don't fail. She wasn't wrong, which was annoying because it meant James had to admit that military efficiency had applications beyond combat. Under Zara's optimization, the Harvest Festival was indeed better organized, which made Mrs. Chen declare her surprisingly helpful for a terrifying alien warrior. 6 months after the bond was formalized, James received a communication from the Meridian Research Consortium, his former employer. They were requesting consultation on xenobotany applications in joint human-Valkorian agricultural projects. They want my expertise now that I'm politically connected, James said, reading the message with mixed feelings. They want your expertise because you're genuinely brilliant, Zara corrected. The political connection just makes them willing to admit it rather than trying to exploit you. Should I accept? Do you want to return to xenobotany? James thought about it. About 5 years of quiet farming, avoiding the field he'd loved because corporate interests had corrupted it. About the possibility of doing that work again, but this time with protection from exploitation. Maybe, he said, if I could do the research without compromising ethics, if I had a partner who'd tell me when I'm being exploited. I excel at identifying exploitation, Zara said, and at preventing it through intimidation or, if necessary, tactical intervention. So you'd support me returning to xenobotany. I'd support you doing work that challenges you intellectually, instead of wasting your talents on basic agriculture. Though I reserve the right to continue optimizing your crop rotations as a hobby. They negotiated terms with the consortium that protected James's intellectual property and prevented weaponization of his research. Zara's presence during negotiations had a remarkable effect on corporate behavior. Suddenly, everyone was very interested in ethical research practices and appropriate compensation. You enjoy intimidating corporate representatives, James observed after one particularly successful negotiation session. I enjoy protecting what's mine, Zara corrected. You're my consort guardian. Ensuring you're treated with appropriate respect is my responsibility. I'm yours, James asked, though he knew the answer. Under Valkorian law, yes, just as I'm yours. The bond is mutual and equal. Her eyes shifted to colors he'd learned meant affection mixed with possessiveness. Though I believe human customs use different terminology. We usually say partner or spouse, depending on formality level. Partner is acceptable. It accurately describes our relationship. She paused. Though Valkorian bonding customs are more binding than human marriage, dissolution requires both parties' consent and formal legal proceedings. You should understand that permanence. I figured that out when you moved your entire military career to a farming colony and started optimizing harvest festivals, James said. You're committed in ways that go beyond diplomatic obligation. I don't do anything halfway. When I fulfill debts, I fulfill them completely. She moved closer, her luminescent eyes holding his. When I bond permanently. You saved my life 17 years ago without knowing. Now you've chosen to bind yourself to me knowing exactly what that entails. I honor that choice with everything I am. It was possibly the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to James, despite being delivered with military precision and tactical efficiency. A year after the bond was formalized, they hosted a joint human-Valkorian research symposium on Halcyon's Edge. Scientists from both species presented work on agricultural cooperation, medical applications of xenobotany, and frameworks for ongoing collaboration. James presented research on adaptive crops that could thrive in both species' preferred environments. Zara provided security and occasionally corrected presenters' tactical assumptions about resource distribution. During the closing reception, Administrator Chen approached them with what looked like genuine warmth rather than resigned tolerance. I never thought I'd say this, but having the galaxy's most dangerous warrior as a resident has been good for the colony, he admitted. Trade has increased. We're getting research opportunities we'd never have qualified for. And crime has dropped to basically zero because nobody wants to operate where Commander Zara might notice. Fear is an effective deterrent, Zara agreed. Also, my wife says you've revolutionized the Harvest Festival logistics and wants you on permanent committee. I've already drafted next year's optimization plan, Zara said seriously. Crowd flow can be improved by 17% with minor structural adjustments. After Chen left, James smiled at his partner, the legendary warrior who'd appeared at his door to repay a 17-year-old debt and stayed because their bond became something neither had fully anticipated. You're happy here, Zara observed. Not a question. I am. I'm doing research I care about with protection from exploitation in a community that's become more interesting than I ever expected. I have a partner who optimizes my crop rotations and treats harvest festivals like military operations. Life is strange but good. Strange is relative. For Valkorian commander and human xenobotanist bonded through ancient life debt, this is remarkably functional. Setting the bar high, James teased. I set all bars high, it's effective. She paused, her eyes shifting through colors that still sometimes surprised him with their depth. I came here to fulfill obligation. I stayed because you're worth staying for. Not because of debt, but because you challenge me, compliment me, and provide perspective I'd miss without you. That's the most direct romantic declaration you've ever made, James said. I'm trying to improve my civilian social skills. You said directness was good. It is. I love you too, by the way. In case that wasn't clear from the whole, accepting permanent bond with alien warrior thing. It was reasonably clear, but verbal confirmation is appreciated. Zara pulled him close with the kind of strength that reminded him exactly who he'd bonded with. Now let's review tomorrow's symposium schedule. The presentation on hybrid grain variants has inefficient visual aids that need optimization. We're at a reception celebrating successful cooperation, and you want to optimize tomorrow's presentation slides. Optimization is a form of care, Zara repeated her earlier statement. I care about everything we build together, including symposium presentation efficiency. James laughed and let himself be pulled into tactical planning that somehow became comfortable routine. The galaxy's most dangerous warrior and a farmer from a remote colony, connected through debt, 17 years old, and partnership they chose daily. It wasn't the life James had imagined when he'd helped an injured creature on Tertius Minor. But it was exactly the life he'd built by making choices based on principle rather than convenience, then and now, and in all the years that followed. The life debt was paid. The bond was permanent. And sometimes, the most important relationships began when someone saved a life without knowing whose life they were saving.